You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
JT Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Thor,
Corey, Dr. O,
Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Mock,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Charlene Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm super excited to have Amy Poeppel on the show with me today. She has a fantastic new book. It's called Musical Chairs, and I think you guys are really going to love this. Welcome to the show, Amy.
Well, thank you so much, Hank. I'm just thrilled to be here.
Absolutely. And we were just joking that we had some Skype issues getting connected, and you know that it's going to be a great conversation when there's that much trouble getting connected. So I'm super excited to have you today.
Well, I'm excited to be here, and I feel like we've all gone through such a technology learning curve recently. Oh. I feel like I should be getting my PhD in Skype and Zoom and everything else.
Yeah, I know that's true. Amy, we begin each show with the same question, and that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
My first memory of wanting to be a storyteller is the summer that I got my first sort of real big girl reading list for the summer. You know, and I guess I was in elementary school, and at the end of the school year, they handed me this packet, and we were supposed to go to our local library and check out our summer reading books. And I think that was the summer. I was probably in, I want to say like third or fourth grade, where I got to sort of select the books from this enormous list. And I spent so much of my time that summer at the library, and I read so many books that I remember just loving. And I thought actually that what that meant was that I wanted to be a librarian, because I just enjoyed selecting the books and being in the library and checking them out and then returning them when I was done. And I just thought, well, that means I want to be a librarian when I grow up. And then I just remember at some point during the summer thinking, maybe I want to write these stories myself. And I actually did start writing a little story that summer. I remember it was kind of a romance, actually. So yeah, I think that was it was sort of my first summer where I was passionate about reading. So yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
So up till that point, were you a bookish kid? What did you, were you the kind of kid that would, stack up books and go read, or was this kind of an awakening of sorts for you?
I was really always a bookish kid, and I always had favorites that I would read over and over and over again. Books like when I was little, books like the Frances books, which were so funny. I could even tell then, and those wonderful picture books. Lillian, I'm not going to be able to think of her last name, who did the illustrations for that book. But I remember already seeing that these were books for children, but that there was humor in there for the parents too. And I remember my mother being very amused by these books, because it was a little Badger family, and the parents were so funny and tongue-in-cheek about parenting. And the books just contained so much humor. So I think right away I knew that that was the kind of book I wanted to read. And then sort of being given the independence to go into a library and start making selections of my own, not just what my mother and my sisters had in the house, but getting to choose books for myself. I remember that just being extremely exciting. But no, I would have to say I was always a pretty bookish kid. I've always loved reading. Like everybody, I think I go through phases where I'm even more passionate about it than at other times, like right now. But I've always been a kid that carried a book around, loved reading. Yeah.
Do you remember, Amy, what the first book or series or author that you can remember that a book or story just completely transformed you, like transported you to another place in time and made you want to live inside that book?
I think it was probably the Laura Ingalls Wilder books, especially the ones that were sort of for older kids. These Years and The Long Winter, The Shores of Silver Lake. Like those books And I know there's some controversy with Laura Ingalls Wilder, but those books really were the first ones that I did, repeat reading. I would read them and then I would turn back to the first page and read them again. They were just, I think it was because I was sort of the age of the character and I could really relate to the main character and sort of see her struggles and see what she and her family went through. And that was just, I think those were the first books that really made me feel connected to the character and gave me this bizarre need to read and reread and just hear those stories over and over again.
I love those stories so much. I read those books out loud to my kids when they were little, and like every great story, you're connected in a way to those characters. They seem so real and like people that and the world seems so foreign and almost like a fantasy world. What a great I know exactly what you mean.
And just that idea of approaching a big winter like that, it was sort of like a quarantine. They were just locked down and having to ration food and just the storm after storm after storm. And I just remember thinking how amazing it is to be able to simplify your life down to such a small number of important things, like having enough food to eat and staying warm. That was so amazing to me as a girl growing up in Dallas, Texas, to sort of think about conditions that were harsh like that. I also just kind of fell into those stories and really, really remember enjoying them.
Speaking of Dallas, Texas, I saw that you were raised in Dallas. You now live in New York, is that right?
That's right.
And you've had some stints along the way in Boston and some other places like that. Do you feel like your Texas roots, your Dallas roots, do you see those roots affecting the way you tell stories or the content of stories? If it would, do you feel like that time and that place where your roots were founded, does that seep into your writing in any way?
I think so. I think the place seeps in, and I think the time period does too. I very much, grew up in the 70s and 80s, and I think that those time periods were, I think that sort of does inform the way you sort of see the world. And certainly my experiences growing up in Dallas were very important to me. And Dallas is still important to me. My family is still there. I love going home to visit. And in fact, the first story that I attempted to tell, which was a novel that I wrote and finished and never published, is an East Texas story. And it was the book I wrote to sort of learn how to write a book and what to do and what not to do. And it was a novel very, very loosely based on my grandparents' their biography and their relationship. And I took great artistic liberties with their stories and really just sort of gave myself license to sort of mess with their romance and with their life stories. And it's a very Southern story. So, and then, when I went to write Limelight, which is my second book, and I thought, I want to have this character who's new to New York. Where should she be coming from? And I thought Dallas. She should move directly from Dallas to New York City because I wanted to get that fresh perspective, on a new place. And I wanted sort of extremes. And when I think about Texas, I think of wide open spaces, and I think of houses that are sort of bigger than we're used to here in New York. And I wanted to have this extreme jump from living large to living tight and small. So it certainly informed that book. And even my first book, Small Admissions, I think I'm very much sort of informed by, I'm able to look at New York with fresh eyes because I am not a New Yorker. I love New York, but I'm not from here. And so it makes it easier for me to sort of see the absurdities of life in New York because I come from this other place. So I would say, yeah, my upbringing in Dallas, which is, I feel like there's still a story in there somewhere that I want to tell. I just haven't quite put my finger on what it is yet.
It's so funny. As also a Southerner, someone from Mississippi, it's so funny what $100,000 will buy you in Mississippi, nearly a mansion, where it'll probably buy a closet in New York City is kind of hilarious.
It is hilarious. And I think there are a lot of things like that where you look at this attitude, which I understand completely, which is that people who live in New York and love New York cannot imagine living anywhere else. But if you have lived somewhere else, you can imagine living. Well, you might still choose to stay here. But I sort of see New York for the wonderful things about it and for the really kind of crazy things about it. And I still go to Texas really often. I love to visit my dad there. And I also am a little bit I'm sort of spread thin because I have, well, we can get to this when we talk about musical chairs, but I have a really dilapidated country house in the middle of Connecticut, and it's kind of a mess. But that also, going back and forth from there to New York also definitely helps me see the humor, both about life in New York and about life in the country, which is really what I try to do in my writing all the time, which is try to find the humor in situations that sometimes when you're living in them, they don't feel all that funny. But I think there's something to laugh at along the way, even if it's hard to find.
Want to grow as a writer and take your writing to the next level? Give ProWritingAid a try. ProWritingAid is a grammar checker, style editor, and writing mentor in one package. ProWritingAid will never replace a human editor. Rather, it helps you self-edit to a deeper level so that when you send it off to an editor, they will be able to focus on the meat of your writing and not spend their time fixing basic writing issues. ProWritingAid is the only platform that offers world-class grammar and style checking, combined with more in-depth reports to help you strengthen your writing. Our unique combination of suggestions, articles, videos, and quizzes makes writing fun and interactive. Writing can be grammatically perfect but still feel awkward and clumsy. ProWritingAid searches out elements like repetitiveness, vague wording, sentence length variation, over-dependence on adverbs, passive voice, overcomplicated sentence structures, and so much more. Nothing makes a writer lose credibility faster than spelling and grammar mistakes. Submit clean, error-free writing. Go to ProWritingAid.com and use code HANK20 for 20% off of ProWritingAid Premium. ProWritingAid, check it out today.
I was doing some prep work for this interview over the weekend, and I came across a video of you and your family at that house in Connecticut, and it's absolutely hilarious. And we'll get to that in a minute, but I had to mention that before I forgot.
Yes, well, I had to do something while I was out there we were starting to, we were all locked down. And I was thinking, my book is coming out. What can I do? And we can talk about this later, but I was out at the house and I thought, I'm going to make a book trailer and it's going to be short and funny. And I wrangled the whole family. I was like, we're all going to participate in this. And my kids were great about it. My husband was super helpful. And yeah, we can
it was so funny. And I definitely want to get to that in a minute. But did I also see that you had studied and worked as a playwright?
Well, I right out of college, I spent about 5 years working as an actress in the Boston area. And I did a lot of plays that I was sort of proud of and that I felt were really good. And then I did a lot of things like corporate industrials and, just commercial work, which, it's so different from doing something like that in New York. Boston was sort of a very, it's not a provincial place at all, but I think at that time, the world of a working actor was just a lot smaller and easier to sort of break into. So I'll tell you what I felt I could do well was Southern comedies. And if somewhere in the Boston area, a theater was running auditions for a Southern comedy, I was like, that part is mine. I am, and I would walk in with such confidence. But I sort of learned quickly that my acting ability window was kind of narrow. I enjoy theater. I get terrible stage fright, but I enjoyed it. But I just felt that the scope of what I could do, the work that I could do on stage was just narrow. So I gave that up after a while. but I never stopped going to theater. And that was so impactful on me, spending those years working in theater. And I still read plays to this day all the time. And I think it's one of the most helpful things I do as a novelist is I read plays, because it really helps me with dialogue and just how to write fun, quick, fast-paced, convincing dialogue. So the first thing I did when I was sort of revisiting this idea of I want to write something, and my Southern novel was sitting in the drawer, and I thought, what can I do? And I had a job at the time working in admissions in a private school in New York, and my husband and I had just gone through the process of moving to New York, and we were doing these interviews to get our kids into schools, and the whole thing was so absurd, and my husband and I were so astonishingly bad at interviewing, which was strange to me because we knew how the process worked and we get along pretty well and we sort of view the world the same way. But somehow we would walk into these interviews and we would either have a disagreement, like in front of the admissions people, or my husband would say something and I would just have this desperate urge to kick him under the table because I would feel like he wasn't sort of presenting our kids the way that I thought we should be. And so I sat down and started writing a series of just comedic scenes of couples interviewing in private schools for their kids. And the admissions counselor was not part of it when I first wrote this. After I started working in admissions, so I was suddenly on the other side of the desk, I turned those scenes into a full play. And I got to do a reading of it at the Actors Studio in New York, which was one of the most exciting things I've ever done in my entire life. Also one of the most, not traumatic, but certainly difficult, in that after you present the reading of your play, the audience tells you everything that's wrong with it. And let me tell you, there were a lot of things wrong with my play. It was really flawed, but it had some parts that worked and some parts that didn't work. And at that point, I had a conversation with my agent, and she said, the Southern novel is just not the right thing for us to sort of go out into the world with. But what about that play? Could you turn that play into a novel? So it's a funny roundabout way to end up. And I was 50 at this point. So I'm 50 years old, and I'm finally trying to write the first novel that we can actually take out, to the publishing industry and try to sell. And it was a very sort of roundabout way of getting there, but it worked. I mean, I read all the parts that I had been told at that Actors Studio performance. I took all the notes, really worked on getting that storyline down in a way that had a better arc to it and all of that. And I just literally changed the entire play into a novel, which was very difficult for me, but a lot of fun at the same time. And that was the book that became my first book. And I was just about 50 years old when that came out. So it's not the most straightforward story in the world, but
I love those kinds of stories because everyone's path no two people's path is the same, and everyone is kind of hilarious in some way. As someone, I've met a lot of novelists who were frustrated playwrights or directors or actors, and writing prose gave them the freedom to kind of encompass all of those roles and do it the way that they completely wanted to do. During this or in this transition from playwright to prose author, did you ever compare the two? Did prose writing fill maybe the things that playwriting or work in the theater couldn't, or can you contrast those in any way?
Yes, I mean, I think that it's a fascinating transition to go from a life either as an actor or playwright or both, or director, as you said, and to take those skills and transfer them over to fiction writing, to writing prose. I think you're right that it's true. I mean, I know Fiona Davis used to be an actress, and I know she and I have talked quite a bit about how we sort of have felt that our time acting kind of informs the way we think about character.
We love Fiona, by the way.
Oh, she's so great. And her new book, Lions of Fifth Avenue, is probably one of my favorites. I mean, I love all of her books, but I think her new one is maybe even her very best, which is saying a lot. It's just wonderful. But I think what we've talked about before is that we both think very theatrically, and I certainly do. I think that my experience of taking dialogue and having to bring it to life on stage as an actor, like that's one piece of it that I think I very much think about when I'm writing these scenes in musical chairs, for example, where it's a big scene. I have a bunch of people around a dinner table, for example. I'm seeing that on stage the whole time I'm writing it, which is great. And I think it's helpful in some ways because I'm sort of doing the blocking in my head and I'm getting the interruptions and the dialogue and all of that down, sort of thinking of it on stage. The difficulty then is to go back and realize that your reader can't see what's in your head. And so you now have to take that vision, which I would, which I'm sort of directing the characters in my head as I'm sort of seating them around this table. But then you have to actually do all the work so that the reader isn't wondering who on earth is talking, who just jumped in, who's sitting next to whom. There's just a lot of work to do. And that's the challenging part for me, is actually setting the stage. Because what I want to do is I just want to put in stage directions.
Right.
I just want to say a dining room with wood paneling. Edward is sitting at one end of the table. I just sort of want to set the scene. And it's just a great challenge when you make that transition over to prose, to actually write it all out, not have too much there. You don't want to be excessive with your your dialogue tags or any of that, but you need to give your readers enough information. So that's always interesting. The other thing I think that's interesting, and actually Fiona and I were talking about this just the other day, is as you're sort of thinking about character, you do end up as a former actor sort of thinking about so in this scene, like, what is she doing with her hands? Well, I'll figure out what she's doing with her hands by thinking about, you sort of think, I'm going to put myself in the position of that character. And I sit there in front of my laptop and I kind of close my eyes for a minute and I try to kind of inhabit that person in a way that it's the sort of the same thing that you do when you're actually playing a role. So I think there's a very interesting connection between theater and prose. I enjoy it so much. My goal, I'm going to write a play one of these days that actually it's so difficult. But if on my bucket list of things that I'm just desperately wanting to try is to go back to playwriting and write a play that actually holds water, like that actually works and functions. And it's just a dream of mine. So one of these days, I'm going to return to that.
Noveler is the best way to write a novel. Why? Quite simply because we've made it the easiest place to do it. Writing a novel is hard enough. Noveler takes care of all the logistical bits of writing a novel, just leaving that small matter of the words to you. It's a clean, beautiful writing interface with writing analytics, goals and streaks, advanced grammar checking, version control, day, evening, and night modes, and many other features designed to take all the stress out of writing. Tell us what you need and we'll build it. Together, we'll build a better tool. With a design-led approach, all the right tools that you need, Noveler saves all your words constantly, allows you to manage and order your novel easily. It's accessible from any device, desktop or mobile. It syncs to Google Drive and Dropbox. It allows exports in various formats, including ebook and more. It also has nice touches like allowing you to write both offline and online, unique for a web-based platform. Everyone needs help with their writing, from inspiration through to grammar checking, so we're doing our best to provide that support. We integrate that support directly into Noveler. Our advanced grammar checker powered by ProWritingAid does everything from spell check to style advice. Our writing courses include the incredible Tim Clare's Couch to ADK. We're really excited to offer all Author Stories listeners 30% off Noveler for a whole year, and it doesn't matter if you choose to sign up for the monthly or annual plan. You'll get 30% off. All you need to do is use the discount code HANK when you sign up. Noveler, Novlr. That's Noveler, quick-witted.org.
Well, Musical Chairs is your third novel, is that right?
Yes, exactly.
In now that you've written the third novel, do you feel like your process is more solidified? You told us about the first book and how you kind of had this thing, and then it transformed over into the novel. But that wasn't your first inclination. That's not how the story was born. But now that your third novel, Musical Chairs, have you kind of settled into what is your process for how a story is born?
I really wish I could say yes. And I don't find this. I don't think this gets any easier. I can't remember who you were interviewing recently. Was it Brad Thor maybe, who said after 20-something books it hasn't gotten any easier?
Right.
I remember thinking, oh my goodness, because I'm only on 3, and I think in some ways it gets harder. I think I'm getting better at recognizing when my writing is not working and stopping and going back. And I do an enormous amount of revision. I do an enormous amount of just throwing stuff away when it doesn't work. And I think recognizing where it's gone off the rails is becoming a little bit easier. I can almost feel it, like this scene is not working. I've got what is wrong here? So I'm working on my 4th book right now, and I got a few chapters in, and there are sort of 3 main characters, and I was sort of shifting the narrative from one to the next, sort of similar to the way I did it in Musical Chairs. And I was getting so restless and so bored with my own self, and so just not excited to sit down and work. And I was like, what is wrong? Like, what's the problem here? And I suddenly realized it was the narration was just wrong. I was telling the story from the wrong people were telling the story. And I made this huge change throughout everything, and made this huge change to have this first person narrator. And it's not even one of the 3 people who were originally sort of telling the story. So I decided to have this outside person sort of suddenly come in and be the one to tell the story. And I got so excited again. And I found myself so excited to sit down at my laptop every day and get to work. I think with my first book, I might have just trudged along a lot longer with the wrong answer. And instead of just saying, no, stop, something's wrong. You're not having fun. You're struggling. Go ahead and address whatever the elephant is in the room, because you need to fix this. So that's what I did. So I think there are certain things I'm getting better at recognizing. I am not an outliner. I wish I could be better at planning. I have a little bit more of a plan with this 4th book than I did with the first 3, but I tend to just write and really try to get to know these people. I think my books are pretty character driven, so I really focus on getting to know the people. And then, halfway through, I'll find out that half the chapters don't work or aren't needed. And that was my homework. That was just writing I was doing to get to know who these people are. So I'm a little haphazard, as you can probably tell by listening to me. I'm a binge writer. I don't sort of work in disciplined, 6-8 hour days. I tend to work in long, crazy hours where I'm obsessive about it, and then I forget to walk the dog, and he's on the carpet, and I don't have a very good schedule. And this doesn't surprise me, because even as a college student, this is how I was a college student. I was the one who might procrastinate, but then I wouldn't sleep for hours getting a paper done that I was really proud of. Like, I would work really, really hard, but just at 2 a.m. instead of at normal hours. So I haven't grown up, I guess.
I think a lot of people can relate to you there. When you first start thinking about a new story, Amy, like Musical Chairs, for instance, did Bridget come to you first? And she's our protagonist, and we'll talk about her in just a second. But did it begin with her, and then you start thinking about who she is and what situation she gets into, or do you start thinking about this friend group, this group of people, and the situations, and then characters come on the stage? How does it begin for you?
I think for me, it's kind of a combination of those two things. I usually think of a sort of a setting or a situation, and I really love big, complicated family stories. I love stories that bring people together, and each of them is arriving with his or her own issues, problems, baggage. And then as they arrive, sort of like Jonathan Tropper, This Is Where I Leave You. Like, I love stories like that. Those are the stories that I really enjoy reading. Or even a story like Stephen McCauley's My Ex-Life, which I absolutely loved. Just bringing these two people together who haven't seen each other in a long time and who have this very strong connection, and sort of putting them in this particular situation and then see what will happen to them. That's kind of where I start. And with this book, I really wanted to explore a lovely friendship between a man and a woman. And I wanted there to be a long, since college friendship, but I wanted their connection to also be related to their creative work. I wanted that to kind of be part of it. And then I wanted this other situation of bringing people together and having there be a lot of change and a lot of upset, and seeing whether or not these friendships can make it through in the face of change and upset. Can they hold on? So that's sort of the way I tend to sort of put together, I'm not trying to be coy. I just think I really have a sort of a simultaneous thing of thinking of people that I want to talk about and a situation I want to put them in. And I think that's true with Limelight as well. I had the idea of this female character who's arriving in New York, and then I had the situation I wanted to put her in of becoming sort of inadvertently the personal assistant of somebody just terrible and having her get sort of thrown into this world of Broadway theater, which was something I was very excited to write about. So I kind of have the two things that I can't really separate one out from the other. That's the same with the book that I'm working on right now. I had the idea of this character, but what came at the exact same time with it is sort of where she is and what would be sort of the exciting event, or the thing that was going to happen that would make, like, why tell the story? Why now? And why does the story matter at all? What is the sort of situation that makes it fun and exciting that you can sort of launch this character into this world? And so that's sort of, does that make sense? That's kind of how I do it. Yeah.
One thing that I love about this book is that you take a lot of the typical tropes that we see in a book like this, and you kind of turn them on their head, or you use those tropes to explore characters in new and kind of fun ways. Was that something that you were thinking about when you started writing the story, or did the characters just kind of unravel that way?
Well, certainly in the case of Bridget and Will, who are the main two characters of
Right.
who take up the most real estate in the book in terms of sort of chapters that are theirs. I couldn't have a male-female friendship without thinking about what are the tropes, and am I going to fall into one or turn them on their head? Like, how am I going to address the age-old idea from When Harry Met Sally, from throughout so many rom-coms and stories that we're accustomed to, is, can you have a man and a woman who are just friends, where, as Nora Ephron put it, the sex doesn't get in the way? Like, does the sex have to get in the way when
Right.
you have a man and a woman and there's nothing keeping them apart, but they're not together, and everybody who looks at them might think, oh, they're so perfect together. Why are they not together? And I just sort of wanted to see, and honestly, I did not know when I started this book what I was going to have happen to the two of them and their friendship. And if one of them becomes involved in a relationship, I really had to think, is there jealousy there? And is there friend jealousy, the way I might, like when we're younger and you're in your 20s and suddenly a friend gets into a very serious relationship and never has time to do anything with you? Like, was I going to sort of pursue jealousy, or friend jealousy, or no jealousy, just I'm happy for you. Like or was it going to sort of be some sort of a combination of all of those things? We're complicated people and we can have more than one feeling at the same time. So I really had to write the book to figure out where all that was going to end up, to have it be convincing and feel like it was motivated and feel like it makes sense. I didn't want people reading it and going, oh, come on, that would never happen, or these people wouldn't behave that way. I just, so it was sort of a process to kind of think through those issues and decide not what I wanted to have happen to them, but what was the most satisfying and the most answering in terms of, once I knew these two characters really well, how would they react? How would they respond? And what could I do narratively that would be the most interesting? So it was fun to think through all of that. I enjoyed pursuing that.
Amy, back to that book trailer video that we mentioned earlier. You really, it looked like you had a lot of fun making that, and you had your family kind of, bantering back and forth with some things about the book. I'm trying to remember one specifically, like where you talked about, was this book based on reality? Of course it's not. This character has, this, and this in her life, when in reality it's this, and this, and it's really funny. Were those things that you were thinking about, or some of the comparisons that you make in the video, or were these things that, after the fact you're like, oh my goodness, this does seem a little bit like reality, but I know that it's not. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So first of all, I love a good book trailer. I'm such a fan of book trailers that give a little glimpse into the book without too much away. So for my first book, Small Admissions, and if your listeners go to YouTube and just type in my name, if they just type in Amy Poeppel, Small Admissions, they can see the book trailer that I did for that book, which just sort of came to me. I just got this idea and I wrote a script and got some friends to agree to do the book trailer for me. And then Simon & Schuster agreed to shoot it. And it was so much fun. So for this book, I was thinking that I would love to do a book trailer, but I really needed an idea to come to me. And so I think I'm in my books a lot. I mean, I think there's just no question that when people read my books, they say, I just kept picturing you as the main character. And even in Small Admissions, I think there are parts of me, it's a much younger version of me, but a lot of me and my sensibilities and my view of the world, and I hope my humor, sort of end up on the pages of my books. But as a writer, we always do resist some of that because it's not me and it's not entirely it's not my story. And I don't want people reading my books and thinking that everything in there is stuff that happened to me, because it's certainly not. But I could not help but be amused when everyone got locked down and I ended up going to my house in Connecticut and my kids are in New York City, and it was really crazy here for a while. And I encouraged my kids, and they were encouraged on their own to come out to the house in Connecticut. So the next thing I knew, I've got a main character in my book whose adult children unexpectedly moved back home. And here I am out in this dilapidated country house, and my adult children unexpectedly moved back home. And I do have a very musical family. I'm not musical, but my kids really are. And I thought, well, that's something that people are going to recognize about me. So I just wrote this script that's just sort of making fun a little bit of this idea that the book is in no way autobiographical, or is it? which is always both true and not true. I do write from my own experiences, and I don't write from my own experiences. Those two things are both absolutely true. A lot of what I write is sort of wish fulfillment. And I think that adult kids moving back home is such a awkward, funny, difficult, interesting kind of situation. I'd already written a humor piece that your listeners can find on my website, where I took that book, the What to Expect When You're Expecting book, and I sort of turned it on its head to say something like, I cannot remember what it was, but it's like what to expect in the 280th trimester and beyond. I had so much fun writing that. So yes, and again, this trailer can also be found on YouTube. If your viewers just put in Amy Poepell musical chairs, it will pop up. And I feel like it does give a little inside glimpse, which I wanted to do because there I was at this house, and the book is certainly based on my house and sort of that idea in mind. So they'll get a little glimpse of the book, and they'll certainly get a little glimpse of me and my family and my pets and everything else. So I encourage them to watch it and let me know what you think.
It's absolutely hilarious. I laughed out loud at it, and I'll include that in the show notes of this episode so everyone can click it and watch it. Amy, I love the book. We put links to it in the show notes of this episode where everyone can find it. It's such a great summer read. Everybody needs to have this on their shelf. But I've been asking some people here lately because the whole pandemic thing is, front and center in everyone's mind, and it has been affecting people. Writers typically spend a lot of time alone, and in an office by themselves, in a room somewhere in their house with just them and their laptop or a notebook or however it is that they create. And you would think that a time when people are locked up at home and forced to stay inside a lot of times wouldn't affect writers so much. But there's some mental aspects to this that how have you been dealing with this time that we're in?
So having a book come out in the midst of this is definitely difficult and crazy. And I think the saddest part for me, and the reason that I so appreciate this opportunity to get to come on and talk to you, is that I miss connecting with readers. I mean, there will be no book tour. And
right.
It's one of my favorite things in the world to not only connect with booksellers and go to some of my favorite bookstores and get to meet readers and talk to them. And that part is sad. In terms of the work part of it, you're absolutely right that I've gotten a lot of work done. I'm also in some strange ways having a hard time focusing because I think I'm more anxious than I normally am. One of the main pieces of our job as writers is to be readers. And I have never read as much as I've been reading during the last 4 or 5 months. I think I set a goal for myself on Goodreads and I surpassed it for the year. I surpassed it like in June or May even. I've been reading so many books because I find it's such a wonderful distraction to step out of my own anxieties and my own situation and just get lost in somebody else's story. It also makes me happy in a way that I've written a book that I feel will give some people joy and will not add to their stress if they're feeling stressed. I think fiction is such a terrific escape, and I'm hoping that my book will provide that for readers because it's a book about people who at their heart are very good people. And I think that there's nothing that happens in the book. There's nothing that's terribly sad or terrifying or stressful that happens in this book. So I'm hoping that it gives people out there a nice escape. And I say that as someone who has taken so much pleasure in so many books recently. And I'm so grateful to those authors for giving that to me. And audiobooks have been such a savior for me lately because when I'm just feeling distracted or I can't quite focus, I go take a long walk and I listen to an audiobook. And I think that's such a great way to get sort of lost in the world of, someone's wonderful plot. It's just fantastic. And I'm delighted that the Musical Chairs audiobook has about 6 narrators. And they do such a wonderful job of capturing this rather large cast of crazy people that I have in this book. The actors just did a marvelous job. And so I hope that people, if you are having trouble focusing reading, give audiobooks a try. It's just a great way to sort of get launched into a story.
I don't know how I survived as long as I did without audiobooks. They are literally a lifesaver. Well, maybe not literally, but
I agree. It's a great way to get 2 things done at the same time because you get the joy of reading and maybe you walk 2 miles while you're at it, or maybe you're folding laundry or driving somewhere. I don't know how I didn't get into this sooner either. But it's been just something that has given me so much joy lately.
Musical Chairs is out, available everywhere now. We're going to put links to it in the show notes where you can get it in hardcover or Kindle edition or audiobook, however you like to read and consume books. You can grab Musical Chairs in the format of your choosing. Amy, if people are just discovering you and want to dig into all the great stuff that you do, where can they find you online?
They can find me on my website, which is just amypoepel.com. And you can find, I do a lot of humor writing. So you can find, I've even written, believe it or not, I've even written some pandemic humor. So you can find that under the other writing. And I have an events page. I'm doing a wonderful event at the end of August with my favorite author, Eleanor Lippman, who I just love. And we're going to be doing an event that's through the Kent Memorial Library in Connecticut online, so anyone can attend that. I'm also on Instagram. If you want to see crazy animal pictures, I have a bear family that's been coming by my house quite often lately, and some bobcats and owls and all kinds of wildlife, and a glimpse into Litchfield County, Connecticut, and New York City. So you can find me at Amy Poepel on Twitter or Instagram. And yes, I just encourage people to reach out and find me and try to keep your sense of humor if possible.
Absolutely. Amy, this has been so much fun chatting. Thank you for taking time to come on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I just very much appreciate the opportunity.
And we'll cut it right there. That was amazing. Thank you, Amy.
Oh, thank you. I had such a good time. And again, I apologize for being tricky to find.
Don't even worry about it. It happens. It happens. The important thing is we got to connect.
We did. And I'm so glad that you told me what the issue was, because now I'm going to find out how I ended up with duplicate accounts. So that's just really, really good to know.
Well, we wish you much success on the book, and we're actually going to turn this episode around pretty quickly and put it out this afternoon.
Oh my goodness!
So I'll tag you online and we'll send you a link to it.
That sounds great. I really appreciate this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amy. Have a great day.
You too. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
World Anvil is a browser-based world-building platform designed for all world builders, writers and novelists, dungeon masters, game developers, and everyone else. World Anvil keeps your world setting safe and organized, helps you find your characters, locations, plots, timelines, and maps quickly and easily as you write. Then, if you choose, you can showcase your amazing world building to the world, beautifully and interactively, to keep your readers engaged. You can even use our professional tier to build your career selling access to behind-the-scenes content your readers will love and growing your community. Build your world setting in any genre with over 25 custom-built world-building templates, complete with prompts to inspire your creativity. Allow your readers to explore the public parts of your world in an innovative new way with interactive maps, timelines, and wiki-style articles. Give special access to co-authors, beta readers, customers, or patrons to see exclusive behind-the-scenes content. There's a free version to get started with all of the major features. Guild membership offers you a host of extra options, including comprehensive privacy settings, co-authors, presentation options, and so much more. Join our community of over 250,000 world builders, including professional authors. Take part in competitions and learn more about world building at this fantastic online community. Use the coupon code HANK to get 20% off all 6 and 12-month subscriptions. WorldAnvil.com. I'm a recent convert and I know you will be too. Scribophile is a respectful online writing workshop and writers community. Writers of all skill levels join to improve each other's work with thoughtful critiques and by sharing their writing experiences. We're the writing group to join if you want to find beta readers, get the best feedback around, learn how to get published, and be a part of the friendliest and most successful writing workshop online. Improve your writing by receiving detailed critiques. Learn from a vast collection of free writing resources. Make lifelong friends in our busy community of writers. Writing is a solitary art, but that doesn't mean you have to be lonely. Lucky for you, there are thousands of writers on Scribophile every day, and we're a really friendly bunch. You've never seen a writing group like this one? Join Scribophile today at scribophile.community.